blessings. Tonight is the half moon, 8th day of the lunar cycle. The waxing moon. The moon is getting bigger, as it were, in the sky. So just now the sky was a lot brighter than it's been recently. So it's also a day people take on precepts, practice meditation, listen to the Dhamma, discuss the Dhamma. So we have a few questions come in, so we'll have a short Dhamma discussion based on these questions. Because of the time zoning of the world nowadays, it means sometimes people are in another place, another country, they ask a question. So this one starts, "Good morning," even though it's evening. "Good morning, Ajahn. I enjoy reading Dhamma books and listening to Dhamma talks daily. And I keep my precepts as well as practicing Dana Parami for some years. Although I maintain my daily sitting, usually I don't sit long, 20 to 30 minutes daily. On weekends I have 2 sits. When I stay in a monastery, I have no problem sitting longer, sometimes 2 sittings of up to an hour each. I wonder how I can improve my daily sitting longer while not in the monastery." Well, the brief answer is effort, discipline, effort, virya. The Buddha, I think monks like to tell me that virya, the word virya for virya barami, effort, energy, perseverance, and virya as in all those lists of dhammas, like the spiritual faculties, spiritual powers, the Bojjhanga, we just chanted the Bojjhanga Sutta, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and so on. This word virya pops up all over the place more than any other word, even more than mindfulness in the Buddhist texts and suttas, which shows you how important it is, because we're all stuck in our habits, we're all complacent. As long as you're not enlightened yet, then you tend towards indulgence, complacency, taking it easy, or if we're honest, sometimes we're just lazy. We also get distracted, we also get stuck in our moods and in our mental defilements and more unskillful habits of body, speech and mind. So to get out of all that requires virya. To get out of the mud requires virya, effort. So where does the virya come from? Well, it comes from saddha, faith, confidence in the Buddha and his teachings. I guess it's seeing the rays of the sunlight on the surface of the water when you're down, stuck in the mud, gives you the hope and the confidence that there is a way out of this mud. If I go upwards through my effort, I can reach the light, the sunlight. But it requires effort to get you from saddha, faith, confidence, to panya, wisdom, clear knowledge and vision of the way things are. You need the virya in between to get you from one to the next. You need a whole range of other qualities as well, but you need this virya. So we have to do things that bring up and support virya in our practice. So different things like personal discipline is a sort of modern word, but in the monastery we have the word kowat, which means your discipline, your monastic practices and regulations and training rules that monks take on. This applies to lay people as well. So you have to make training rules for yourself. You could put all this under the heading of sila as well. Sila brings up discipline, effort in the practice. Sila is often thought of as morality, and that is a big part of what sila is, but it also means that, say, Ajahn Chah once described sila as that behavior which brings you to be mindful of the in and out breath, which, if you pull that phrase apart, means an awful lot of things, both mental behavior, becoming mindful of the breath, turning your mind towards the breath, having the effort, the virya to do that and to sustain your attention on the breath. But it also means your actions and your speech as well, because we do an awful lot of things that take us away from Dhamma practice. Just spend our time doing other things. Obviously we have certain necessary things we have to do in life, work and various duties and responsibilities. But we also engage in a lot of other activities which are not necessary, absolutely necessary, sometimes trivial, distracting, sometimes just downright harmful to us and maybe to others as well. So we always have to sit down and think things through a bit and make plans and rules for ourselves, or set up, schedules, and determine how we're going to use our time, and encourage ourselves to do things and say things and think things which bring us more towards supporting the training of the mind in the Noble Eightfold Path, and particularly meditation. So if the breath is your meditation object, well, think it through, what sort of activities make it hard to watch the breath, to be mindful of your breath. So, when you do have free time, are you filling it up with those activities which are not conducive to watching the breath? Getting drunk, watching movies, playing games, going here, going there, doing things that are not really conducive to mindfulness and virya and insight. I'm speaking very simply here in kind of black and white terms, but you get the idea. We have to start leading our life in a way that supports the practice of meditation. And it will bring you to the point where you want to meditate more, do it more. Even if you're living at home, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes is good, if you can keep that up, meditating every day. But if you make meditation put it at the center of your life, maybe you'll want to do more of it. You'll get more benefits from it, more peace, more insight, so you want to do it all the more. Of course, going on retreats, staying in monasteries, these are probably the most conducive situations for practicing meditation, but we have to make the best of our situation, so maybe you have to dedicate more time and streamline your life so there's less distraction, less things are getting in the way of your meditation. Sometimes we also have to use satya, this determination to practice, to realize the truth, and then sticking to that. And adhitthana, making resolution, making your mind determined, firm to complete certain tasks, do certain things, such as get up in the morning at a certain time and meditate maybe, or when you do meditate, to complete the amount of time that you've assigned to yourself to meditate as well as you can, as completely as you can. To keep precepts, to live your life in a way maybe to give up certain activities that are distracting and energy draining, and to take on certain activities that support meditation and are conducive to the Dhamma. It sounds like you're doing that already, but you maybe need to do more. So, we have to think it through, talk to ourselves, make plans, establish routines, good habits, good kinds of behavior to help us, and then stick to it. Keep practicing, whether you like it or not, as Ajahn Chah would say, whether you want to meditate or not, you still do it. And that applies to every aspect of the practice. So whether you want to do that act of kindness and generosity, the dana that you planned or not, you do it anyway. Whether you want to keep a precept or not, you keep it anyway. So you use effort, determination, commitment, discipline, patience, wisdom, mindfulness to keep you on the path and to develop the path in your daily life. Sometimes you can also support your practice, say like, if you do a regular sitting meditation, maybe also take up a regular walking meditation. Nowadays everyone does more exercise than they used to, which is good. Maybe you can incorporate your personal exercise regime, you incorporate some walking meditation in that. It can be faster, slower, but it can be walking in a place back and forth, or it can be walking around your neighborhood or in a park or some place. Doing that regularly as a meditation to supplement your sitting meditation. As we know, sometimes sitting meditation will become dull, sleepy, there's various obstacles. So walking meditation can be really helpful. And if you can do 20 or 30 minutes sitting, maybe you can do 20 or 30 minutes walking so that you complete 1 hour of meditation at a time of day that suits you. If you work, it could even be like, you go for a period of walking, mindful walking in the middle of your day, if you have a bit of time off or something, or on your way home from work, you walk longer than you might normally. Normally you might drive a car or catch a bus or something, and maybe you decide to walk. If the weather is not too wild, walk a bit longer than usual. So you're making effort and extending periods of time where you're practicing mindfulness in a formal way. And then committing to that, so you keep doing it over and over again, whatever your mood is and however you feel, as long as you're not seriously ill. See if you can stick to what you've determined to do. And try and learn from your own mind. Say if your mind is resistant sometimes, it's stubborn, doesn't want to meditate, doesn't want to do the walking, doesn't want to do the sitting, doesn't want to keep precepts, doesn't want to listen to Dhamma. Try to investigate that. Why? Where's that not wanting coming from? What's the real problem? What are you getting stuck on or attached to? So we also have to use a lot of wisdom and investigation in daily life to try and understand our own mind and what's going on, our own habits, observe them. Where does wisdom come from? Well, it comes also from mindfulness, paying attention to what's going on. And then in contemplating things, like say if you have a bad mood, you're disappointed in yourself or someone else, you've had an argument, disagreement, you've made a mistake, something's gone wrong. Try and learn from that and see how it affects something like meditation. When you're disappointed, upset, angry, you don't want to meditate, so it might stop you. Try and get to know what's going on in your mind and see how it's affecting you, and maybe try and see the impermanent nature of your different moods. Somebody in your family sets you off, gets you annoyed, and then you say, I can't meditate, I'm too angry or too agitated or too worried or too sad. Where does that thought come from that says I'm too this, too that, too sad, too angry, can't do it? These are all just words and thoughts. emotions that are coming up. But we also have meditated enough, I think, to see they're all impermanent. What's impermanent is not really you. It's not a self, a person. It's a mood, it's a mental state. So try and bring in the wisdom when you're having these obstacles to try and get through them quicker and see them for what they are, as impermanent moods. So you have more patience and you don't let them affect you so much. You may still sometimes meditate when you feel terrible or feel sad or feel upset about something, for example. But that's your meditation, learning to be with the different moods and the different mental states that come up. Get to know them, see them arise, see them pass away. You can't expect meditation always to be plain sailing, easy, smooth, happy, blissful. Sometimes it will be, but there'll also be all kinds of obstacles and changes going on in your experience of your body and your mind. So they become part of the meditation. So if you have this idea of being one who's practicing with virya, with effort, with faith, everything, as Ajahn Chah used to say, everything becomes part of the practice. How you feel, what's going on in the world, what's coming your way, how your day has been, or how you're expecting your day to be if you're meditating in the morning. This is all part of the practice. Everything is teaching us, everything you can learn from, good and bad. As far as I know, those who have progressed in their practice have learned how to do this, how to motivate themselves, bring up the energy, the effort, put up with their own baggage, their mental behavior, their obstacles, whatever their situation, and they just keep going. Sure, sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder, but they don't quit, they don't give up, they keep going. Again, as Ajahn Chah said, if you keep going, you'll get there. How quick, how long it will take, how quick it will be, that depends. Doesn't matter. As long as you're going in the right direction, you'll attain your goal, you'll get there. So don't quit. Next question. Dear Luang Por, how did you overcome doubts and fear when you were alone in the wild practicing, in the wilderness? There's danger lurking everywhere, yet you have to overcome the sankharas arising in your mind while practicing. How did you do it? With gratitude and appreciation. Well, it's true, in the wilderness there are dangers, obstacles, just as anywhere really. In a city there's dangers and obstacles too, of a different kind. But in the wilderness, in the city we tend to create a lot of comfort and convenience for ourselves, which sometimes is not helpful because it makes the mind go to sleep a bit. And in the wilderness, the reason monks go to the wilderness, quiet, lonely places, is to arouse wakefulness, to wake themselves up, sometimes through the challenges, the dangers, sometimes just the unfamiliarity with the terrain, the weather, the place, not knowing anyone, no help near at hand. This kind of wakes you up, makes you very alert, and that can be good for practice. One thing monks will do when they go out into the wilderness, particularly if they're on their own or just in one or two monks camping or staying away from any urban area or inhabited area, just camping out in a lonely mountain or forest or a cave. One thing they'll do is sometimes moving around, keeping that sense of unfamiliarity going by staying in one place for a few days or a week. And once you start getting used to a place, you say, that's enough here, and you move to another place. And you keep doing that over periods of time, to really sort of push yourself a bit and to keep this sort of unfamiliarity with the surroundings going, so that that wakes you up, keeps you alert. So we actually look for that, and then of course you learn how to be with that state of mind. And sometimes there is some fear. It's more just, the not sureness, as it were, the uncertainty of things. It's not sure what you'll meet or what you won't meet, or what the weather will be, or what's around the next corner, or what will happen and where you'll get your food the next day. You can't be absolutely sure, and that's helpful to us. It's not that you're always, on the edge of your seat, afraid of being swallowed by the tiger or something. It's more just uncertainty. And that makes you think about life, what's important, makes you see a lot of desires, attachments to comfort, desire for pleasure, company, pleasure, convenience, certainty. We crave certainty. It's why, humans build their civilizations and societies to try and overcome the uncertainty of the wilderness. But certainty also makes the mind go to sleep and just follow its habits, and kind of builds up quite easily, makes us build up attachments, and may limit us in certain ways. Whereas the wilderness, although it's challenging and can be annoying, troublesome, it can also wake us up, and many monks have found that useful for developing mindfulness and then insight into impermanence and letting go of self. If you're in the wilderness, far from anyone, with nothing for you, no possessions, and nobody knows you, there's no one there, a lot of your sense of self drops away. You see the foolishness of a lot of your attachment to your ego, your sense of self, who you are, who you think you are. And sometimes you do meet wild animals, sometimes you meet very tame, kind of not very dangerous animals. That doesn't matter, but your sense of self, your pride, your conceit, all the things that make up this sense of self, a lot of it drops away, or a lot of it seems like not that important. When some wild animal or bird comes along, you can't go, "Do you know who I am?" to it. You can't project some sense of self-importance on it. You're just another being in the forest, and maybe you're just taking up someone else's space. You're in their area, or maybe you're seen as a threat to them, or maybe they seem a threat to you. But the sense of self we normally project there's not a lot to it in the forest, is it? Especially if you're on your own, or if there's just, there's no one else around. Your name, your background, your personality, you don't have to impress anyone, you're just there, day after day maybe. So you see through a lot of the superficial attachments to the ideas of self and who we are. And that's very useful. So you still apply the same practices, whether you're in the wilderness or in the city, but sometimes you have to apply them more intensely perhaps. You have to be more patient. You have to arouse strong faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, in your practice, in your precepts, the things you do have, which are all Dhamma qualities. It's not so much physical things you have, there's the Dhamma qualities that you are taking refuge in. So you have to really take refuge in your practice, because you have nothing else to keep you going, to keep you level-headed, to keep bringing up the mindfulness, to keep bringing up the wise reflection, and then you just see what you need to do. And you deal with things as they come along, but you get used to that. So it's maybe not so hard once you've learnt to overcome some of the practical issues. Where do I bathe? Where do I get my food? Where do I sleep? how do I deal with different weather events and different situations. You learn some practical things, then that makes your life a bit more smooth. But then you still also have your mindfulness and your meditation practice there to develop, and you have to deal with your own mental defilements as usual. Just as the previous question, we have laziness and doubt and worry, and we have desires for things all coming up. Even if you're in the wilderness, these things will come up as well. And there may be some added defilements that are not normally stimulated at home. Say you might have fear of a wild animal that's around, or you see its track or smell it or hear it. Fear of ghosts, if you believe in them, or even if you don't believe in them, sometimes some monks I know who staunchly do not believe in ghosts meet something that they can't explain and they say, was that a ghost? They're not sure. And some monks are absolutely petrified of ghosts and they've got to deal with that. But that's part of the reason you put yourself in those positions, is to see your various attachments, what the mind does, what the mind brings up. Loneliness. Often loneliness can stimulate fantasies, desires for things you want. So number one might be a partner, sexual desire, but also just fantasies about what else you could be doing. So if you're sitting on a lonely mountain top in the rain, cold, wet, miserable, with nothing to eat or drink, and not much comfort, then you start imagining things that you would like. You can fill your mind with that. So the practice remains the same, dealing with the mind and what it brings up, establishing mindfulness, contemplating impermanence, contemplating the dukkha of things, the not self of things, using the Four Noble Truths over and over again. And you keep doing it. And sometimes you can use the Four Noble Truths in different ways. The wild animal comes along and you watch your reactions. So as the wild animal is growling at you, you're watching craving, attachment arising, and you say, this is the paticca samubpada at work, because you hear the growl. And you see your own hair stand on end. And you say, this is fear. This is stimulated by seeing. I'm seeing the wild animal, I'm hearing them, I'm smelling them maybe. With this stimulation through my senses, various unpleasant feelings of tension, fear arise, the heart is pounding, the knees are shaking, and then all kinds of thoughts come into the mind, trains of thought, the desire to run, to flee, thinking of people, help Buddha, help me, Ajahn Chah, help me, Devas, help me, maybe. All kinds of thoughts and emotions are stimulated, but you're breaking that down as whatever it is around you. The snake is slithering up to you, or the bear is growling at you, or whatever's happening. You can still contemplate the Dhamma, the arising and passing away of conditions, and one thing leading to another. I had a really good insight into that once. I was in the forest and I was meditating and I heard something large moving around next to me, but I had my eyes closed and I was practicing anapanasati, and I didn't want to let myself get distracted. So I was just sitting there meditating, and a bear, quite a large bear, walked right next to me. I don't know what he was doing next to me. He's probably just sniffing me and moving around, looking for food, but he slowly walked past me, and then he walked 50 meters on and met another monk who later came running down to say, there was a bear, did you see the bear? And I said, no, I didn't see the bear. I didn't know it was a bear. I knew there was something there because I could hear it, but I was meditating and I didn't want to disturb my mind. I was one-pointed, so I didn't open my eyes and I didn't think about it. I just knew sound arising and ceasing. So sometimes it's like that. You're in a situation, maybe there is something of there's something dangerous, but you just observe arising and ceasing and don't create anything more out of it. You could do the same to a ghost. You hear some strange sound, or there's some unpleasant, cold energy around, something unpleasant, or whatever. It's still an experience that arises and ceases. You sense it with the mind, you hear, you see, whatever it is. In the end, it's just something that arises and ceases. Another condition to be known and let go of. If you get in the habit of doing that, wherever you are, whatever the problem is, whether you're peaceful, you're not peaceful, you're comfortable, you're not comfortable, whatever's going on, there's certain practices that you get into the habit of using, and they can deal with almost anything, or literally anything you face. You can deal with it in the same way. It's not sure. Maybe it was a ghost, maybe it was an animal, maybe it was not. Maybe it was a person. When I was a young monk in Thailand, they used to talk about something in Thai called Sura Saming, this kind of special kind of tiger that has sort of supernatural abilities to fool people, to hypnotize people, or make them, people who meet it, imagine that there's something else. Like they can make the person imagine that the tiger is a human, so that they're off guard, and then the tiger can jump on them. And the Thai monks love to talk about this all the time. And I thought, well, it's just a legend. I'm never going to meet a Sura Saming. It's just a story, one of those stories people tell you. Then one time I was staying in the forest, and I heard somebody walking towards me, footsteps. It was at dusk, so I could hardly see. So I was just listening to the sound of footsteps walking down the hill towards me. I was brushing my teeth, which you tend to do at dusk, what I do anyway. So I'm brushing my teeth in a very kind of ordinary situation, standing there with a kettle of water in one hand and a toothbrush in another, and then hearing footsteps coming towards me, getting closer, louder, through the forest. Not rushing towards me, but not slow either, but getting closer and heavier. And I thought, oh, there's a person. And this was on the border between Burma and Thailand, so I thought, oh, maybe it's a Burmese refugee or a Karen soldier who's coming through, because these are the sort of people you would meet occasionally in that area. So I was just waiting for them to emerge. Oh, it's a person. But as it got nearer, I thought, no, that's not a person, that's an animal. Maybe it's a tiger. The sort of deliberate steps coming towards me. And then I thought, no, it's a person. And that little discussion went on in my head, back and forth so many times. I got really confused. Person, tiger, I don't know, I can't see them. So I just waited. And in the end, it was a tiger. Shone my torch, and there was a nice stripy face with slitty eyes. But what I remember is how sure at first it was my thoughts said, this is a human, this is a person. So you could say, well, it's just my imagination. It probably was. But then I thought, this Sura Saming, they can be like that maybe. They play on your slight lack of mindfulness, lack of understanding, and proneness to confusion. And so you think they're a human, so you're off your guard. Because when I thought it was a person, I was off my guard. I thought, oh, person, I'll just greet them. But then it was a tiger. So all kinds of funny things happen when you're in the forest, true, and sometimes scary things happen. But you contemplate the arising and ceasing of your own mental state, the emotion, practice patience, mindfulness, effort, contemplate anicca, dukkha, anatta. And you get in the habit of doing that, you relying on your practice to deal with these sort of situations. Last question. Dear Luang Po, what is the difference between Luang Ta and Luang Pu? Well, these are Thai terms. Luang means, it's a word of respect. So we translate it usually as venerable. So somebody you venerate or give respect to. So it's obviously used usually with senior and old monks. Lung Ta means grandfather monk. Lung Pu also means grandfather monk. In Thai, there's a different word for the grandfather on your father's side and your mother's side. So they both refer to grandfather. Sometimes there's a subtle difference. Lung Pu tends to be slightly more respectful for a senior monk, for a meditation master perhaps they might apply that, like Lung Pu Man. It's very commonly heard. Lung Ta is also applied to senior monks, such as Lung Ta Mahabua. It's one of the most famous users of the word Lung Ta, or his students use the word Lung Ta. But he sanctioned that because Lung Ta is actually sometimes seen as a little bit folksy or not quite as respectful as Lung Pu. But Lung Ta liked to use that term. I think it was practice of humility and showing a lack of conceit. You wouldn't go as far as say irreverence, but just he was sort of playing himself down from being, the grand old Lung Pu. That's the word he used for his teacher, Lung Pu Man. He called himself Lung Ta, which is like just sort of a step down to show that he's not practicing self-aggrandizement and sort of building him up into something. So he called himself Lung Ta, like this sort of old granddad monk kind of thing. So it's a more folksy way of referring to the monk, perhaps. But they're both terms of respect, reverence, just familiar Thai terms for older monks. Luang Po, can you please speak about Luang Po Wen or Luang Pu Wen? Well, Luang Pu Wen was a disciple of Luang Pu Man, just slightly older than our teacher Ajahn Chah, Luang Pu Cha. Luang Pu Wen lived till he was almost 100. He died the year after I arrived in Thailand, so I didn't really know him personally. But his impact on Buddhism, on the Thai Buddhist community, which is a large part of the country, was quite big. He became a household name by the end of his life. Like most forest monks at the beginning of his life, he was totally unknown and lived in northeast Thailand. And like so many monks, very similar to Ajahn Chah, he started off in a normal kind of village temple, studying the Buddhist texts. So he learned a little bit of Pali and learned about the suttas and the Vinaya, following the curriculum that most monks in Thailand will follow, doing some exams. But in the village monasteries, one of the phenomena that monks who have a bit more faith and commitment to the practice find is they're always staying with monks, and then most of the monks disrobe because they only are temporary ordinations. And that goes on every year. Your monks ordain and then disrobe every year, and you're sort of left there. And Ajahn Chah had the same feeling. It's like, all the monks keep disrobing, I'm still here, the others disrobe. And that can be a little bit kind of draining on your faith, and you're sort of, on the one hand, you're helping the other monks, because often monks will teach each other, help each other. And then they disrobe, so it's like, now they've gone again, now I'm back here on my own, or maybe just one or two monks left, and then a new generation come in, and then they disrobe. It's not necessarily very conducive to meditation for monks who want to meditation. Often the monks are, because they're new, a lot of new monks all the time, not so disciplined, not so knowledgeable, So sometimes monks who are more long-term, have a long-term commitment and particularly want to meditate and train in meditation, they often decide to go off on what we call tudong, wandering, looking for a teacher, but also to test themselves out in the lonely wilderness places. And when Luang Por Wen started, it's like, we're talking about over 100 years ago now, when Thailand was all mostly forest, wild, lots of disease, wild animals, difficulties for forest monks. So he wanted to face that, to train himself, to go into his meditation more deeply once he had a foundation in his study of the Buddhist texts. And so he went off and he wanted to find a teacher, so he went looking for Luang Por Man. Again, like many of his contemporaries, he spent a long time wandering around the forests of northeast Thailand trying to find Luang Por Man, because in those days there's no phone, no computer and internet. Very little information was moving around the country, as it were, so all you could do was go on rumour. I heard he was up in that province, 200 kilometres away. And you walk towards that province, wherever it is, and then someone says, actually no, he's in a completely different direction over there. So monks would spend a lot of time walking, practicing meditation in quiet places on their way, camping often, or occasionally staying in very simple hermitages. Looking for a teacher like Luang Por Man could take months. But he did eventually find him and committed to being his student. And so he learnt a lot from Luang Por Man about the practice of the Vinaya, the monk's discipline, how to incorporate that to support your practice in training in mindfulness. And then of course he learnt about meditation from Luang Por Man. And then he went off again. His first visit to Luang Por Man, he only was with him 4 days, I think. And then he went off, but he met him again over the years. So there was a sort of an off and on relationship with Luang Por Man. And he went around the forests of northeast Thailand. He also liked to go into Laos. Because 100 years ago, you didn't need a passport. You needed a boat to get across the Mekong River. There's no bridges in those days, but that could be arranged. And you go to Laos, you didn't need a passport, and the Laotian people spoke the same dialect as northeast Thais, ate the same food, very similar or same culture. So it's very easy for forest monks to walk between Thailand and Laos, move between them. But he didn't just go to Laos, he also walked to India, if I remember, all the way to India and back, which is no mean feat. Again, you don't need a passport in those days. This is pre-Second World War, so he would just walk as a monk, Tudong monk, receiving alms wherever he could sometimes, going without food or getting very little support. So his generation, they're very tough, skinny, could walk walk for many hours on very little food and so on. And he'd say things like, I didn't ordain to gain food or wealth, I ordained to gain the Dhamma. There's one story I always remember. When he was still living in the village temple, a very common practice is lay people come to village monks wanting their astrology, their astrological chart. They want their palms read, or they want the stars read, and they want to know their fortune or lack of fortune. And even monks would forecast each other as well. So Luang Por Wen was living with one monk who was supposed to be very skilled at astrology, and he told Lumpur Wen, he said, "You're okay for the moment, but when you reach," I think he said, when he reaches 10 reigns as a monk, 10 years as a monk, you've got to be careful because you'll meet the woman who you were married to for many lifetimes, and it's like your karmic partner, and you have to be very careful. You have to avoid her like anything, because she'll pull you out of the robes, and she'll arouse so much desire in you when you see her that you'll really struggle. So just avoid her if you meet her. And then Lumpur Wen said, "Well, how will I know her?" He said, "Well, she'll have a face like a Bodhi leaf, this kind of round, symmetrical face, radiant like the moon, and she'll have beautiful, fair, white skin. And perfect build. I guess nowadays you'd say she's a 10. Maybe is that how they describe each other, young people? Anyway, he described her. He said, "You'll know her because she'll look like this." And then Lumpur Wen forgot about it because many years passed. And then one day he was in Laos bathing at a river, quite a large river, and a mother and daughter, 2 women, came paddling their canoe down the river. And as he was bathing, he looked up at these 2 women, and his eyes caught the eye of the daughter in the boat. And as their eyes met, he was zapped by her, and maybe she was zapped by him, we don't know. And he just knew instantly, this is it, this is the woman. And then all the memory of the astrological reading flooded back, how she would look, I think he also said she would come from the east, and because he's in Laos, that's to the east of Thailand. So there are all these little things that popped into his mind, but it's mainly the emotion that was stirred up. It was love at first sight. So he just grabbed his stuff and ran for it from the bank of the river, didn't talk to them, didn't look at them again, because he knew this is it, this is my danger. I have to get out of here, following the instruction he'd been given earlier in his life. So he ran for it, got all his stuff, ran and left the whole area, left that village, that area, and never went back, because he knew that was the girl who would pull him out of the robes if he stayed. But that wasn't the end of the story. Like most meditation monks, physically he removed himself from the danger, but the mental danger, the desire, had been stirred. So he said for the next sort of few months, the image of this girl just stuck in his mind, whether his eyes were open or closed. It's like this image is now floating there all the time in his mind or in front of him. So his main practice for the next few months was cutting off the interest in that image, just turning to his meditation object, reciting Buddha, and not turning his mind to observe that image, even though it kept returning. You could call that a kind of samatha practice, just establishing mindfulness, letting go of the hindrance. And after a few months he had a little bit more stability of mind, his mindfulness and samadhi was getting stronger, and then it was time to enter the range retreat in one place. So he spent that range retreat 3 months contemplating the body, mindfulness of body, kaya gata sati, running through the 32 parts of his body first, becoming very familiar with each of the 32 parts, hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth and skin, and so on. Visualizing them, contemplating them as impermanent, as unattractive, not self. Really become very familiar with his own body and seeing how, on the inside, the human body is not attractive. And there's all kinds of unattractive aspects to the human body, and it's impermanent, it's getting older, one day it will die. Every bit of the body can become injured or diseased, he just thoroughly investigated his own body, and then when he was very more established in that, then he turned to bring up the image of the woman, the girl, who previously he was getting overwhelmed by. Now he would compare his body parts, the hair, the nails, teeth, skin, the organs, the blood, the urine, everything, with her 32 parts. And he's saying her 32 parts, one at a time, each one of them is no different than his. Whatever ugliness, unattractiveness he sees in his body, he can see in hers. That was his reflection. And he kept doing it until he could see any human being is the same, made up of 4 elements. These body parts are all impermanent, they're not self, and they have an unattractive side. And when we die, they all degenerate, decay, smell, go back to the elements. So we believe maybe by the end of that Rain's retreat, he'd managed to overcome his lust and probably let go of a lot of lust, all his lust perhaps. Don't really know, but perhaps. So that was a big event in terms of Dhamma in his life. And he went on to practice mostly wandering around, not staying in any place for too long, for many more years, until he was in his 70s, and he came up to Chiang Mai. Luang Por Plien, who stayed here a few times, was one of his students. And Luang Por Plien used to tell us stories how Luang Por Wen was in Chiang Mai practicing. Eventually, he was at the monastery that Luang Por Plien lived and passed away at, in Ban Bong, Wat Aranya Vivek. But even then, he didn't finally settle there. He was in his 70s and very ill. But he decided, I can't remember what the reason was, there was a kind of a calling to another monastery 70 kilometers away or so many kilometers away in a place called Doi Me Bang. You can read his biography, it's online and the book is out. So he walked all the way to his last resting place. As an old sick man, he was still walking and could walk for many kilometers, even though probably he was in pain and very tired. So he settled in Doi Me Bang, and that's where he passed away. There's a chedi there they built to him, you can go to visit. He was always very simple, humble monk. He hardly had any possessions. He wasn't that educated, so he spoke very simply, but what he spoke was always pointing to the Dhamma. Luang Por Plien told me one story. He said the first time he went to Singapore to teach the Dhamma, he was invited to Singapore. He was staying in the Thai temple there, and he gave teachings all day long. It was very hot, and in those days there was no air conditioning, so very hot, humid. And he taught many people for many hours through the day, and then he went to rest at about midnight. And he thought, I'm exhausted, I've been teaching people, hundreds of people all day long. I'm going to take a rest because I'm exhausted. So he lay down on his bed to rest at about 12, 1 a.m. And immediately he had a nimitta of Luang Por Wen came into his room. Luang Por Wen wasn't there, it was just an image, but Luang Por Wen came into his room and started scolding him and said, what kind of a forest monk are you, lying down sleeping? Are you just going to sleep here? You're really a student of the Buddha? Where's your effort? Where's your practice gone to? What are you doing sleeping? And just scolded him for 5 minutes and then disappeared. So he said, you're so shaken up by that, so woken up by that. He meditated for the rest of the night. Didn't rest at all, he didn't dare to. So Luang Por Wen had a very powerful mind and could look after his students even in other countries. It's quite a common kind of experience for a student of a great teacher like Luang Por Wen or Luang Por Cha or any other of the great meditation masters, their students have those kind of experiences. So, that's probably enough for tonight. Answering your questions. We'll leave it there and wish you well with your Dhamma practice.